Okay, so today we're talking about the idea of kneading that is permitted in cases of foods that are not that are not either they haven't been mashed or their mashing is already after they've been mixed before. So there's no prohibition of lash with food that has been mashed. So if you have, for example, you made baba ganoush on Friday, or you made mashed bananas, and some of the liquid went up, you are allowed to mix it back in. Since it has already been mashed and softened, the act of kneading does not fundamentally change it. Malawach is the other Yemenite food I was talking about. So, therefore, one may mix a dish of meat, potatoes, and barley that have fallen apart, and one may even add water to the mixture to form one mass. If you remember, we talked about cholent, that you're not allowed to mix it while it's still in the crock pot on the element, but this would be another good example that the meat, potatoes, and barley are coming apart, and we want to mix it in order for us to be more yummy, etc. So one may also add gravy to mashed potatoes and mix them together. Since the potatoes are already mashed, there is no prohibition of lash. And that's from Maimonides' response I've quoted in the Beit Yosef. Beit Yosef was before Rav Yosef Karo wrote the Shulchan Aruch, he wrote the Beit Yosef on the tour. If a mixture was made before Shabbat, but some liquid gradually separated from it, it may be mixed again on Shabbat, since there is no prohibition of lash for something that has already been mixed. Since all permit this, it is unnecessary to use a shinui, making a change in the order, but one should still stir more slowly than on a weekday. For example, if oil has risen to the top of an eggplant salad, it may be mixed back in with the eggplant. Similarly, if peanut butter separated and there is oil floating on top, it may be mixed in. And there's all kinds of other examples. Some cottage cheeses have the whey float, and other cheeses, and also I think people who use almond butter instead of peanut butter, almost the same thing exactly happens. Or chocolate spread. Many poskim seemingly allow adding ingredients to a mixture that had been prepared before Shabbat. However, some are stringent, therefore the ingredients may be added with a shinui. For example, hot sauce may be added to hummus as long as it is mixed with a shinui. And hot sauce, they're not talking about the temperature, they're talking about the how hot it is in terms of spicy. Similarly, if an eggplant spread was prepared before Shabbat and mashed in its juice, mayonnaise may be added to it on Shabbat with a shinui. So when we make baba ganoush, we usually don't add all the mayonnaise to the eggplant, because that way we can use it again later in the week. And we have already seen in the previous halacha that the shinui can involve moving the spoon back and forth in straight lines crisscross or perpendicularly when steering. If this is not a recognizable shinui, the spoon should be removed from the mixture entirely after the completion of each stirring motion. One may mix cake crumbs with soft cheese or milk, since the crumbs were already kneaded when they were made into cake, and thus the prohibition of lash no longer applies. The same thing with cereal. You are allowed to put it in the milk, or you're allowed to put the milk into it. There's no difference, because it's not ever going to turn into a thick mixture. However, some are stringent and maintain that once the baked item has been crumbled, the original act of kneading has been nullified. Therefore, one should mix the crumbs with a shinui and do so only for immediate consumption. But again, we can be lenient about that. Another important principle is that lash involves taking dry, discrete materials and binding them together with a liquid. However, if the dry ingredients spread through the liquid to which they are added, this is not considered lash. Therefore, one may add herbs to soft cheese, since the herbal leaves spread out and do not clump together. Similarly, one may mix granola into soft cheese or yogurt, since the granola bits do not join together and become one mass, but rather adhere to the cheese. One may also mix strawberries or bananas with cream, since the pieces do not bind and become one. One may add sugar or cocoa to soft cheese, because the aim is not to bind the granules of sugar with the cocoa, but rather to flavor the cheese. and that's also what we talked about, coffee and tea. Last but not least, about that same idea, this year, Shabbat is Erev Pesach, and so when we were growing up, we always had borscht on the afternoon of Eve of Pesach, because you're not allowed to eat bread, and you're not yet allowed to eat matzah. So we would have borscht with and we would add sour cream to it. So again, those are two liquids, and so it does not become one mass, and that is permissible. And the Achronim debate whether one may mix two viscous foods like soft cheese and honey. Some maintain that since they form a new thick mixture, it is considered lush. And others maintain that the prohibition of lush exists only when mixing dry ingredients with wet ones, while one may mix two wet ingredients together. In practice, one may mix the two foods with a shinui. And I'll just pick up a couple more laws in Halacha Zayin, Halacha 7, because they go back to other examples that we already talked about. One may not make pudding if the mixture is thick enough that it cannot be poured. However, pudding that is loose and pourable may be made using a shinui. As we saw above in section 4, one should begin with the dry ingredients and then add the wet ones, and one should mix with the shinui. According to Rav Moshe Feinstein, let us reiterate that this shinui may be steering with a back and forth or perpendicular motion instead of circular motion. And the one last halacha, which I was not aware of, that there's a difference between jello and pudding, is that because pudding can stay soft, but jello actually hardens. So one may not prepare gelatin dessert by mixing powder and water together. Although the mixture starts out loose, ultimately it hardens. Thus, one who mixes water with gelatin powder is transgressing the malacha of lash. And of course, he's talking about fish gelatin or chemical gelatin, which is permissible for Jewish people, but not gelatin that is from non-kosher animal bones. And so we'll stop here and we'll open it up for questions.